Today we'll look at a story from the book of Matthew that places Jesus and a few of his disciples up on a mountaintop. Mountains are truly captivating creations. They remind us of how small we are and can draw our attention to the bigness of God in the world in ways that really nothing else can. There's nothing quite like the perspective that you get from the vantage point at the top of a mountain. The mountain we find ourselves on today is in Matthew 17, and it holds deep significance for those in this story. Jesus and three of his friends wander up the mountain and encounter God in a profound way. Jesus' journey to the cross is confirmed, and his friends' invitation to follow him is given. It's ushered to them that to gain their life, they must lose it and pick up their cross and follow him.
Not only is Jesus going to die, but as his followers, they also knew that they would have to look at their death. It's in this Jesus has to die realization that our story picks up today.
Matthew 17 reads, 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and the two brothers, James and John, and led them up a high mountain to be alone. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance was transformed so that his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. Suddenly, Moses and Elijah appeared and began talking with Jesus. Peter exclaimed, "Lord, it's wonderful for us to be here. If you want, I'll make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But even as he spoke, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my dearly loved son who brings me great joy. Listen to him." And the disciples were terrified and fell face down on the ground. Then Jesus came over and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." And when they looked up, Moses and Elijah were gone, and they saw only Jesus. As they went back down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." Jesus and his friends go up a mountain and encounter God. The Bible Project recently did a series on the significance of mountains in the biblical narrative. They help us understand that the Bible reflects the broader ancient Near Eastern understanding that mountains are places where heaven and earth meet. So the mountain becomes a place of transformative encounter with God. In ancient Israel's imagination, the mountain is where the heavenly realm in the sky meets the human realm on the land. In this place, people can access God's wisdom and power and his very presence. And so ascending the mountain again represents drawing near to God and his ways and the ways of his kingdom, a picking up of our cross with Jesus and following him into death towards life. Throughout the Bible, other significant mountain moments happen between God and his people. It's a place of testing, a revelation of wisdom, a meeting place with God. It's a place where God positions his people so that others can see light shining brightly from them. And for Jesus, it's a key place in his journey that he walked on earth. In the book of Matthew, we actually see Jesus on 7 different mountains. He experiences different and significant things on each of them: testing, teaching, miraculously providing food for thousands of people, resting, encountering God, and encountering others to send them out to share the good news of him. These mountains each represent spaces where the barrier between heaven and earth feels so thin, where the voice of God or the actions of God or the call of God feel thick and near. Many of us have those sorts of spaces in our lives, special moments or places or people where it just feels like the presence of God is so near. For some of you, maybe that is the mountains, surrounded by majestic nature. For others, maybe it's when you're surrounded by others in musical worship, or when you have a moment to pray with someone, or when you hear someone else talk about their faith and their life with Jesus and feel encouraged by their journey. Where are those mountain spaces for you? What are the spaces where the barrier between heaven and earth feels thin? What does God do in you there? And how might you need to go back there at this time in your life? There's significance in Jesus on this mountain because he is also coming to the place where heaven and earth meet, the road to the cross, holding within him life on earth and eternal life. He will come to that place and then he will become that place. Jesus will be the place where people experience heaven and earth meeting.
At the end of Matthew 16, the previous chapter, Jesus tells his disciples that the time has come for him to die. The realization that one is going to die is a sobering fact for anyone to understand. It's a moment in which I think we would all call the people closest to us to be with us in our final moments if we were to be put in this situation. Jesus, knowing he must die, and his friends not really wanting to believe it, it is in the sobriety of this moment that Jesus, fully man, takes his 3 closest friends to the mountain to encounter God. As you follow Jesus on this journey to the cross, who are the people that you take with you?
In life, we have companions on the journey for those who have paved a way for us, the ones who help us pick up our cross and follow Jesus, the ones who help us run from death to life with our eyes fixed on him. Maybe these are giants of the faith who can only be known through their stories, like John Wesley, the English theologian and evangelist who founded a revival movement in the 1700s that laid the foundation for our church's denomination, Free Methodism. Or the 17-year-old girl who moved to Saskatoon in the early 1900s and wrote to the Methodist superintendent asking him to please come set up a church or a mission here in Saskatoon, beginning what we now know as Lakeview Church over 100 years ago. Or maybe there are giants of the faith who sit or have sat right here in our congregation amongst us, like those who faithfully pray at the prayer altar with folks after services each week, creating a space for heaven and earth to meet. People like Myrna Foster, or Mark and Marilyn Jacobson, or Alan and Bev Stovall, or Neil and Elizabeth Nickel, and so many others. Folks who model faithful surrender to Jesus and help us walk with Jesus from death to new life. We can look at these examples and be inspired by their stories, their faithfulness, and their fruit. We can see God at work in and through them, and we're spurred on to ask God, how do I continue to join you in the renewal of all things? Who are your people? Who are the people that you look to motivate you when it feels like picking up your cross and following Jesus is feeling too hard to keep doing? So Jesus talks to Moses and Elijah while his face shines. And Peter, James, and John stand by watching. And Andrew, how do his friends respond to this?
Well, Peter is often known to be a little too eager, so maybe he says some wrong things. So he says, "It is so wonderful to be here. Let me build 3 tents so we can stay a while."
So Peter is moved by this whole experience, and so he offers to build shelters of memorial in this moment. The creation of a physical thing to commemorate an encounter with God was a pretty common practice in that time. Building a shelter would have also fulfilled that practice, but there would have been a deeper meaning. It would have been an echo of things that had been built in the past to contain God's presence before. A nod to the tabernacle where God's presence was kept to travel with his people, or the temple built to contain God's spirit, a representation of a place where God dwells. Peter's response is warranted. This is a significant moment that needs to be remembered, and he wants to go to work. But his response is a little misguided. Peter offers to build 3 shelters, one for Moses and Elijah and Jesus, and he equates the same response for each of them. He shows that he doesn't yet totally get who Jesus is. He sees the supernatural interaction and sets Jesus on the same shelf as the spiritual greats, not higher, not yet.
God then shows up in a bright cloud and settles on the mountain, cutting off Peter and his desire to set up a camp. And he speaks, echoing the blessing that he gave Jesus at his baptism. "This is my son who brings me great joy." But then he adds this phrase, "Listen to him." What are we to listen to? What is so important for the disciples and us to hear that the Father comes down in a cloud to declare it? Well, likely the previous thing that Matthew recorded Jesus saying, "If any of you want to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me." Are you in a time of waiting, watching to see if God will do what he says and will be who he says he is? There might not be things that we understand in this life. We might question if God is listening to us. We might question if he even cares, or we might think he's doing the exact opposite of what we think a good God should do. But because Jesus has been raised from the dead, we know that he reigns in the fullness of his glory. The glimpses that we get here through stories of others, or through the Bible, or through our own experiences of the divine, we can have hope that one day we will see his full glory, that we'll get it too. We can have hope that these things might be led, that we might be led into hard things, but there's life on the other side.